Hello, and thanks again for tuning into SNG Live, Securing State, Local, and Higher Ed. I'm Benjamin Freed, the technology editor at StateScoop. Joining me today is Chris Covino, Policy Director for Cybersecurity in Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's office, and Nichole O'Brien, Branch Manager for Cyber and IT Solutions at Dynetics, a Leidos company. Chris, Nichole, welcome to SNG Live. Thanks for joining us. I think we're gonna have a great conversation. Chris, I'll start it off with you. You were instrumental in opening the Los Angeles Cyber Lab it's been open for a few years now. How has it improved security for the city of Los Angeles, your business community, and your residents?
Yeah, so just for a really quick background, for those that don't know, CyberLab is basically a public-private partnership between the city and the business community in the LA area. We started this partnership to kind of leverage the threat intel that we were producing internally. So we wanted to extend it to the business community, and then obviously we ended up extending it to other cities too, federal partners, state partners, etc. But one way we help with businesses is, again, through sharing indicators of compromise that we're identifying on our networks. We can do that via email with the smaller businesses, and the more advanced businesses, we actually have them connect to our threat intelligence sharing platform, which is based on the TrueStar platform. And was actually, we were able to do this through a grant from DHS back in 2018. So they helped basically CyberLab become a information sharing and analysis organization for the LA region, which we thought was, a really good policy move. In terms of more residents, we actually have kind of moved towards providing residents kind of security awareness kind of baked into our other programs, especially our digital access and digital equity programs. So this is related to CyberLab. CyberLab provides some content, but CyberLab's real mission is more that kind of threat intel, with large businesses, small businesses. When it comes to, this digital access and digital equity programs, again, we really want to bake security in. We don't want to see it as separate. For example, if you're teaching driver's ed, you don't want to teach safety and then driving. It's kind of all baked into one. So it makes more sense, especially for the general public. Some things we've done there. We have a great website. I think it's Get Connected Los Angeles, which has all these resources for Wi-Fi hotspots, things like that. We plan on adding a kind of security awareness page to that. Also in our digital literacy programs, at our libraries, at our parks, at our aging centers, we include security training in that. We're even doing this pretty cool thing where we have it's called Future Core. Again, this is more general mayor's office policy, but it's about 400 junior college students who are going to be embedded at the libraries, at the rec centers, at the senior centers to teach, general security, but, just general digital literacy. And again, we're going to bake security in there. The final thing that we're doing, we're working with Metro, who's been developing an LA Secure app, which is very similar to the initiatives done by Michigan State and New York City. It's that mobile app kind of endpoint protection. It kind of warns you if you're connected to a bad network or an insecure network, I should say. It warns you if your phone's not up to date. For Android phones, it will actually scan for malware. So we're kind of really pushing that. And again, we see that as a very important thing, as it's critical because we're putting more services online, and a lot of people, are going to depend on these services. And we see it as an equity thing too, because, for example, we did a project with USC, and they found that about 17% of the most vulnerable households in the city only have a smartphone device. So they don't have a computer with the traditional kind of endpoint antivirus security, right? So they rely on that phone, and that phone needs to be secure. So we're very excited about kind of promoting the LA Secure app. We're beginning the rollout now with Metro.
That sounds like a really great program. It'll be very interesting to follow that. Nichole, you work with a lot of state governments, maybe some cities, universities. What are the areas of cybersecurity that the organizations that you're working with, what do they need to be focused on the most right now?
It's great what Chris was saying actually about the things that LA is doing for residents. That's a little more forward leaning than some of the cities that we've worked with. So cities and K-12 definitely kind of lag behind states and universities. And I don't know if that's maybe it's the size that, we're bigger and we pay more attention. We have a bigger attack surface, as we like to say. Or if it's just they've got a different kind of organization that they're kind of used to a little bit more rigor in what they do. But hands down, ransomware Okay, so ransomware, your value, your data is more valuable to you than it is to someone else. You know, they're not stealing as much anymore. They're just locking it up. And again, that more sophisticated state approach, university approach, they're a little more used to that. They've been watching for the PII. They've been watching for, if it's university, the FERPA data, all of the kind of regulations that they've had to watch. The cities in K-12 are a little less funded, I'll say. And so they haven't been as deliberate in backup systems, and maybe they didn't feel they were as targeted. They may have known they were, but they didn't really think it was going to happen to them. A couple of years ago, there was a rash of K-12 systems that had ransomware and couldn't open schools, you know, when they went back in the fall. That was well-timed, right? So the things with, again, just recognize you're vulnerable, do something about it. But those are the biggest things we're running into is the ability to take action, the recognition that they need to take action, and then of course the funding available to take the proper action.
Yeah. I actually love to hear more about the funding, the funding issue. Chris, I know you mentioned that you opened CyberLab with some support from DHS. What does the funding picture for cybersecurity look like from where you're sitting?
So currently from the state, this basically the local level, we depend, clearly we use our general fund to fund a lot of our security, but kind of these kind of extra programs, we really rely on federal dollars. So UASI, the Urban Area Security Initiative grant, is kind of the primary grant that we rely on. This started right after 9/11, so it's very terrorism focused. The voting authority is mostly fire and police, emergency management, public health, et cetera. They've been pushing, the Biden administration, actually the Trump administration too, started pushing to kind of include cybersecurity to be a requirement in the UASI cycle. So I think Trump administration had it at 5% you had to spend on cyber, and then Biden administration moved up to 7.5. So this is great. We applaud this. The only problem is you're crowding out kind of traditional public safety spending, which is vital right now. Our fire department's stressed from the COVID pandemic. Police also have a lot of issues. Again, COVID pandemic has just stressed the whole system, right? Public health, emergency management, et cetera. So, the reliance on UASI isn't sustainable in our mind. We're very excited with the bipartisan infrastructure package, the state and local grant there. So I think that will provide over $1 billion over 4 years, and with 80% going to local government. So I think that's a real key going forward. And then, there's also some exciting things, not necessarily money, but, Nichole mentioned K through 12. I think the president a few weeks ago signed the K through 12, basically Cybersecurity Act, where CISA is going to start kind of putting more resources or studying around that problem. So, there's a lot of exciting federal legislation being passed and down the pipe to address some of these things.
I just want to stick with you for a second. As one thing that you've been mentioning in the past is building up a collective defense. Is really about building up a collective defense. So what does that mean to build up a collective defense, and how is Los Angeles going about that? And what lessons are there for other local governments?
So this is one of our actual key initiatives, along with the other two being, the city's own security, so we can provide services, and then what we just talked about, how do we help businesses, how do we help the public? So collective defense is really, it's respecting the interdependencies regionally and nationally, and recognizing the benefits of collaboration. Some key examples of that, right? So again, talking about schools, Los Angeles Unified School District is actually a separate organization from the city. The county is a separate organization from the city. They control public health and elections. The city actually does not have those departments. We have ports, which are the Port of Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles, right next to each other, two different ports, two different organizations. There's 88 cities in LA County, 12 million people, over $1 trillion economy. There's a lot of interdependencies around us. So it's really important that we kind of work together. And nationally, again, look at ports. If the Port of Los Angeles or Long Beach went down, it's going to affect the entire supply chain in the whole country. The Biden administration has been pushing to kind of expand port capacity, specifically here in LA and Long Beach. So it kind of shows you this will solve some of these, or attempt to solve some of these supply chain issues. How we do that, again, right now it's centered around threat sharing. We especially work with CyberLab, our regional fusion center, the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, along with federal, state, and other local partners. CISA is obviously very much involved. The California Cybersecurity and Integration Center is a key partner in this. And some of the things we do joint advisories with the Fusion Center. So for example, if we're seeing a malware campaign, hit our networks or hit our inboxes, we'll actually work with the JRIC, the Fusion Center, to put out a bulletin. And we'll send that to all the regional cities. We'll send that to national partners. We'll send that to our Cyber Lab mailing list, which are like businesses. So we really kind of spread awareness of campaigns we're seeing, because we see a lot of threats, right?
Yeah.
We also obviously use our threat sharing platform I mentioned earlier, and we connect that with major cities, across the country. We're working with the Coalition of City CISOs to kind of expand that kind of threat sharing portfolio. And then, talk to each other, leveraging common resources. So we also do a monthly joint threat call with, the Fusion Center, the California Cybersecurity Integration Center, and our federal partners for, all kind of regional government entities around here, some critical infrastructure too, and some other key partners. And then we even extend that invite to, again, cities that we're working with through the Coalition of City CISOs. So we have analysts from Boston, join our calls.
Yeah, I want to let Nichole get in here. Nichole, do you promote that level of collaboration when you're advising a government or university?
Absolutely, that cooperation is critical. We do have a state that we work with that I believe has really kind of gotten it down. They recognize that as the kind of the top of the food chain there, that they have a responsibility to inform, educate, and that's really a lot of what it comes down to, is educating the organizations, because they just don't understand. It's not what they do. They're police officers. They are, as you said, healthcare workers, things like that. One city we work with, for instance, had a little issue and they weren't really worried about it. They needed some storage, whatever. Well, is body cam footage. That's probably kind of important to protect, not just that it's not seen, but to protect it. Well, the state was helping. It was the city government. And so the state was like, look, let us help connect you and understand maybe with some higher law enforcement areas, whether it's FBI, DHS, and they're able to bring those resources down to a more local level. And then we've had those cities, once they kind of get things together, they're like, you know what, we need to do as a service, inform our constituents, inform the businesses that are there, the K-12, and you have to take it all the way through. So yes, that collaboration and cooperation is exceptionally important. It is exceptionally hard.
Yeah.
The time, even the environment that we're in right now, where people are so dispersed in the environment, you don't even have the hallway talk anymore, where you can say, hey, I talked to so-and-so and this is a threat.
Yeah.
Okay. If I don't get it in an email or a phone call, maybe it's difficult. So the information sharing is even harder amongst us in one organization. And so sharing it amongst, it has to be deliberate.
Yeah.
Security doesn't necessarily happen by accident. I mean, you may lock yourself out, right? But
Yeah.
that's intentional. So it's got to be deliberate. And that's one of the things that's, I think, really important when it gets all the way, when you look at the whole chain, right? Go from K-12, pre-K, like all the way up. And so you got to get going from a very early age, I think, educating the people. I think a lot of folks are, especially now, maybe I have college age, so they are very trusting. They have been very trusting in this digital age that they've been built in. And so that carries over. And so we have to be even more, again, deliberate in what we do to make sure that we are protecting what we know, what we don't know, and sharing everything that we do know and what worked, not just what's bad, as you mentioned, threat sharing. What worked? What did you do that was good?
Yeah. Well, when you have such a, when you have so many organizations in that chain, that you mentioned, something that certainly has come up is third-party risk, and what do you advise governments or universities to do to mitigate those third-party risks, and how concerned should organizations be about it?
Well, I think it's increasing. Okay, so we've always had third-party risk, right? And I think one of the most classic pieces that folks will see is like credit card, right? That's a classic story on that. But you've got third-party risk that's not just individuals or some service providers, but in, again, this environment where we've gone to more remote learning, if you're a university, remote working, if you're government, we've seen a lot more of that. We're also saying, okay, we've got to get more things into the cloud. Let's go to the cloud. That's going to solve our problems. Everybody's working remote. Let's go cloud. Well, there's some risk associated there too. You may be displacing some risk with patching and things like that aren't happening because people aren't in the office, but you are taking on other risk when it comes to the staff, that they're not necessarily trained to maintain it. They're more likely to make some maybe configuration mistakes. And so there is a desire to move to a third party, but then there's still a desire to hold on to things. And so the establishing the risk profile of the organization that you're doing business with, making sure that they have their proverbial ducks in a row to make sure that they've gone through any certifications that they may need to do, that they are following NIST, or if they're cloud, they're FedRAMP certified. That is hard. Okay. So if you're not a cyber person that's doing that every day, how confident are you that you're even doing your third party risk assessment correctly? Right. I mean, I can't jump into something else. This is what I do. I can't go do someone else's job as well as they can. So having a framework is very important. And I know just recently, I think it was the FDIC and some of the other financials are actually trying to put together a risk management framework for third party and managing third party risk. Well, banking is an important one. So they absolutely, I certainly do want them to manage all the third-party risks they can. That's personal. But using that as a framework, someone getting out there and getting ahead of it is definitely one that will be useful to others. The federal government does a little bit of that already. They push their NIST risk management framework for federal programs and anything that's got to do with DoD information. And then they're kind of flipping that another phase where they're requiring some other certifications for organizations that handle DoD or federal information. So risk management is where it is. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. Chris, if you have any quick thoughts about that, about what Nichole just said.
So, I mean, yeah, third-party risk is a huge headache here, everywhere, right? Like, because we're not doing a lot of our own software development necessarily, and, having all is on-prem and all that. So, we take that very seriously. And again, taking a holistic approach to it, our city attorney has worked very much with our information technology agency and the procurement office to kind of bake security assessments in the beginning of the procurement cycle. We're trying to include better data protection clauses into the standard provisions, and we're already kind of putting that into contracts that, especially we see as, could impact city systems or city data. We're trying to improve monitoring, compliance assessment, trying to do all of that kind of, ahead of the game. And we want to move towards what, the Biden administration executive order recently kind of is pushing for, is that, really look at the supply chains. So software bill of materials and all that. We're not quite there yet, but that's kind of the goal.
Yeah. So we're running low on time, but Nichole, I did want to ask you one final thing. This is, a bit more probably, focused on your university work. A lot of them who do work with the Defense Department, they're subject to the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification program. That program is evolving. I know the Pentagon's, reviewing that program, maybe issuing some updates. So as that program evolves, what's it going to mean for the universities that are subject to that?
So I've been working with some universities that are trying to get ahead of the game right now. They're a little bit farther ahead. They recognize the need to protect information and data. The issue that's coming up with the CMMC side is that those who are most in need or that are subject to needing that certification to continue to do business with the federal government or DoD organizations, they're not the ones that necessarily control the IT. Mm-hmm. So one organization I was working with recently, we talked to them. They were like, oh, we need our annual risk assessment. We're going to work through this. And we said, well, what about CMMC? Well, we don't have any of that. Yes, but your organizations that are a true pipeline of funding for university, they're extremely important. They don't know what exists. And so getting those two parts of an organization is just exactly, Chris, like we were saying, lots of organizations, lots of things. I don't know what you do, but I rely on you. And so getting that connection between those who build and support the IT systems with the folks who do the research to understand that it's a common problem. The other thing that's going to come up is that it's not a funded item. No one's going to give you money to go get CMMC compliance. So that's another, when I mentioned being some things being underfunded or not having enough resources, that's something that universities are going to have to work through. They've got to first recognize that they have to do it, but then also work together, identify all the places this data might be hidden, and then make sure that they have the proper supply chain, you use your phrase there, Chris, but make sure they have that lined up, because again, supply chains has been an issue. You can't get some IT if you want it right now. And this may be in place, say 6 to 9 months. they don't have a lot of time. The government contractors and such have been working on this. They've been aware of this for a while, and it's been slowed down some with COVID and some other things. But the universities have not necessarily recognized that this is a requirement for them. So they're even farther behind the curve. But when that contract comes out, even if it's something they've been doing and it says must be level 3 compliant to bid, not just to win, to bid, it's going to be a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, there's so much more we could say about that, but unfortunately we are just about out of time. Chris and Nichole, thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks to everyone in the audience for tuning in. Hope you all enjoy the rest of this SNG Live presentation on securing state, local, and higher ed.